Let's do a game design discussion. Let's talk about the content swamp. So there's lots of tutorials online these days. It's very in vogue. Create an infinite number of planets. Create an infinite number of monsters. Create an infinite number of guns. Create an infinite number of NPCs. Create an infinite number of spaceships. Create an infinite number of side quests. That's great. All of that stuff is fine. We've been doing it forever. Even back before there were computers, we were generating random monsters. But my problem is, all the focus is on how to create this stuff, and none of the focus is on what the heck the player is supposed to do with it once it's created. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about how to actually use the content that you've created. Right now, the basic idea is the player starts to come close to the devs, and the devs go, oh my gosh, we got a player. We generated all these random planets. We have all these cool random planets. So many planets. Eat them! Eat all of my random planets! And the player goes, I feel sick. I can't even tell the difference between these planets anymore. They all look the same. Sure, your random creation creates a huge variety. It's wonderfully done, but the player is drowning in content. He's up to his neck in content. He can't move at all. And that's the content swamp. It doesn't matter how many cool monsters you create because they're buried behind all of the normal average monsters that you create. And even if all of your monsters were cool, they'd still be buried in each other. So that's not good. You have to stop doing that. Here are some concrete ways. 1. Reduce. Obviously, you can go a long ways by simply not having as much of your randomly generated content around. Make a lot of it rare. Rare resources are great for a couple of reasons. The first is because they make your randomly generated stuff really meaningful. If you only run into a monster every 2 hours and a new alien species every 10 hours, then that makes all of them matter a lot. Sure. Randomly generated hills. Fine, go ahead, fill your worlds with randomly generated hills. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about randomly placing the rocks or the trees or anything like that. I'm talking about the random unique things like the monsters and the spaceships and the invaders and the alien species and all that stuff. Make that stuff rare. Make it really rare because it'll make it stand out. Even if the players only ever encounter 3 pieces of random content, in this day and age of resharing, they'll post pictures of their random content and they'll suddenly realize, whoa, my monsters are completely different than Doug's. And that's great, that's perfect. It also gives you another huge advantage, and that is goals. By allowing the players to scan for rare content, you can set up the idea that the players are going to have to go through hoops to get that rare content. So in a space game, you'd be like, I have just scanned a planet for oxygen. There's a planet around that star. It's 4 jumps away, and it's got oxygen. That means there's probably life. Let's go look at it. Or, oh, that star over there has got radio signals. So it's probably an alien species, or maybe a giant abandoned alien mausoleum. Let's go take a look. And that's a great medium-term goal. Right now in these games, there are only 2 classes of goals. There's the super short-range goal of gather resources, and then there's the super long-range goal of go to the center of the galaxy. Both of those are really bad goals. Medium-term goals are the bread and butter of exploration games. And so this is a great way to introduce some. It also minimizes the random wandering as a goal. Players in exploration games, they are probably going to want to randomly wander, and you don't want to punish them for that. But there are times when they're going to want some direction, and this is a great way for them to go, okay, this is the way I can go when I'm done wandering randomly. Great. Now, Spore, I gave this same basic talk when Spore came out. Spore did pretty well on not doing something that No Man's Sky did very, very badly. So in my initial talk, this next part of the reduce section I didn't cover. So in addition to reducing the content that you create, you have to remember that you're creating an exploration game, and exploration games are all about flow. Once your player is in their flow, they're going to play your game for 2 or 3 hours, however long they've got available to them, and they'll just wander up and down the bands of flow, and that's great. You want to let them do that. And you know what that means? Don't interrupt your players. I'm sure you guys all know what I'm talking about. Yeah. It gets really bad in No Man's Sky. I've been killed by the achievements in No Man's Sky. It's pretty... I mean, I can imagine other things that could break your flow this much, but they involve setting your computer on fire. So, don't do that. Look, you don't need achievements in this kind of game. If you want to put them in, feel free to put them in as something that serves a purpose. You've got short, medium, and long-term goals. And what achievements do in the normal situation of these games is they provide those medium-term goals. But you know what? Your content should be providing those medium-term goals. So that means that you need to shift your achievements either to long-term goals, rare things like, find the special diamond planet, or you need to shift your achievements to super, super short-term goals like, make that jump and take a picture of that view. So reduce. Reduce the amount of content you throw at the players, and reduce the amount of interruptions you throw at the players. 2. Reuse. Your content is now pretty rare. The player might play for 2 or 3 hours before they see a new piece of your random content, a new significant piece. Well, it's not a very good idea to just let them pack their bags and leave after that. You want to really leverage your content, and there's 2 ways of doing it. A, they can take it with them. And B, they can revisit. Now, both of these are great. It depends on your exact kind of game you want to build. If you've got some kind of warping system where they can return to where they've been really easily, then revisiting is probably going to be better. Whereas if you don't, then taking it with them is going to be better, and you're going to want to give them a lot of space to collect this stuff. Now, this stuff all has a lot of additional gameplay that hooks on super easy. For example, I'm going to this planet, I found this cool monster on this planet, and I'm going to build this facility that just automatically takes these monsters in and feeds them and makes sure they're healthy and collects their droppings because their droppings are made out of, refined aluminum. And here you come by, you pick it up, you go all the way again, fine. That's gameplay that can hook into your revisiting mechanic. Gameplay that can hook into your take it with them mechanic. Breeding various versions on your ship and selling them on the market. Freezing them and putting them into a zoo. There's lots of things you can do, and a lot of this take it with them stuff is super cheap because you're just putting the monster models into a specific location. It's really very simple, very straightforward. There's no reason not to let the player do it. This means that whenever the player runs into a new monster, they're immediately going to think, how can I make use of this monster? Does this monster have some good genes that I can analyze and maybe graft into another monster later? Does the monster sell well on the market? Maybe it sells well to a specific society on the other side of the galaxy. Does the monster shit titanium? Figure it all out. And that's great because you can actually work all of that stuff into the analysis phase of your game. Rather than just scanning a monster, you can also do things like observe it in ways which tell you what it eats, what its genes are, and so on and so forth. And lastly, 3, recycle. So the great thing about randomly generated content is that there is this algorithm that all of the randomly generated comes from. Yeah, pretty cool. Why not let the player in on that? Sure, you're randomly generating a planet. Great! Let the player put in these giant machines to terraform it. Or you've randomly generated a monster. Great! Let the player breed them, mutate them, try and find new traits for them. Oh, you've randomly generated a spaceship. Great! Let the player rip it apart and put it back together, change out some of the bits. Your algorithm for generating random content can be recycled to let the player in on that. And that's really great, especially because that means you can move your content even further apart. Now, instead of every 2 hours, you can make it every 5 hours because the player will spend a couple of hours slowly refining whatever they already have while they are moving towards their next medium-term goal. So that is my big talk. That's how I recommend you avoid the content swamp. Reduce. Reduce the amount of noise. Reduce the amount of content. Reduce the amount of interruptions. Reduce. Let the players get in a flow state and let them try and find the next piece of random content as a major medium-term goal. 2. Reuse. Once they've found that piece of content, let them take it with them or let them come back. Make sure that it matters. It's not just a visit and then you pack your bags and leave. 3. Recycle. Let the player make that content their own by changing it, altering it using the exact same algorithms that you used to build it. These 3 details are what you can use to take your game from just this mess of random crap that the player can't even distinguish into something that the player really feels strongly about and has made their own. Anyway, that's the theory at least. I hope you enjoy.